This is the Marriage Podcast, and I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician turned relationship and intimacy expert, and I specialize in showing couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I myself have been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place because I will show you how. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, you are in for a treat today. For many of you listening, my guests need absolutely no introduction. And for those of you who don't know my guest yet, I really could spend the whole time talking about the things that I know that they have done professionally, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start by saying that I'm in a number of groups for physician entrepreneurs, doctors who are devoted to other side hustles and full-time careers as coaches and device manufacturers and different things like that. And in those circles, there's something that happens that reminds me a lot of when my kids would anticipate the next Harry Potter book coming out. And the buzz would be created for months, and people would make memories of what it was like waiting at the bookstore at midnight until the book is released. And there's something like that that happens whenever Dr. Peter Kim puts on his Leverage and Growth Summit, where people are referring to it for 6 months and, oh yeah, and Peter Summit this and Peter Summit that. And so the first time I wasn't actually interested, but it was all that buzz that got me so interested. So I participated in what I think was the second one. But before we go further, let's just clarify that Dr. Kim is an anesthesiologist, a real estate investor, an educator, and really devoted to supporting other physicians in having meaningful careers and meaningful financial security. And I feel like even though your focus is different, Dr. Vicki Chan, you have kind of an equivalent focus. You're an ophthalmologist, you're practicing medicine, you're also an educator, but of the general public, and you have such a fun and meaningful social media presence. Your TikTok videos, your Instagram, like I find it super inspiring as someone who at 53 still kind of every now and then thinks social media is superficial. You really use it the way I imagine in the 1950s, moms and doctors congregating on the town square would be talking about important things, and you found your way with that. So just to summarize, you're both incredibly accomplished doctors, you're real estate investors, and you're devoted to educating doctors and the public. Is there anything else that you want to add, Vicki?
I mean, you make it all sound amazing.
Well, it sure looks that way. Anything else to add? No? Okay.
Well, we have 2 kids. That's what we spend the rest of our time doing. Is we spend our 2. We just moved to Orange County recently, and we have 2 young children that are in school, and then we have 2 dogs that we're trying to raise at the same time.
Oh, which is harder?
Which is the kids for sure, but yeah, sure. But yeah, I mean the dogs. We've had the dogs longer though.
I see. Okay, well, I've raised 4 children. Well, I'm in the process. My youngest is 9. And 1 dog, and I thought the dog was way harder, but maybe that says something about me. Okay, well, I would love to know, when did the 2 of you meet? What was your getting together phase like? Where were each of you in your training?
Want to start?
Oh, yeah, I can start. I mean, we met in medical school. I was a first year and he was a second year, and we met at, this is going to sound really cool, at an Asian American Pacific American Medical Student Association meeting.
Yeah, we actually didn't go to the same school. We were actually at 2 different med schools in the same city. And so I think without the meeting, I don't know, there's not a great chance that we would have met. We're different years. Maybe we had different circles of friends, but it just kind of worked out really nicely. And that's where we met. And
did one or both of you have a kind of ulterior motive of relationship-oriented connections?
You mean like if we're going to the meeting or kind of?
Yeah, that's exactly what I
Oh
mean.
yeah, that's what you mean. Yeah, no. I actually was kind of the person in charge of my group. I had a friend who was in charge of the other group at that other school, and we said, "Hey, let's just get together for fun." I had no real intention of even dating someone in medicine or just meeting anyone there. And so I was just going to meet new people and have fun and get our groups together, and kind of started that way. And then we just met, hit it off, and went on a date a couple days later. And then I don't know. I'm sure there's more to the story, but the rest is history.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, you actually remind me, my husband and I met in medical school in the same year, and we got engaged, I think, our second year of medical school. And once we were engaged, he considered dropping out of medicine very seriously and had been an Israeli folk dancer and wanted to dance. And I think he was just kind of burnt out. He studied science with the scientists, not the pre-med students at Harvard. He majored in neuroscience. He was just work, 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 and he wanted to have some fun. And it kind of came over him like a wave in his second year of medical school. Now, the reason that I share that is that I always thought that I responded to people's intelligence and their heart and their kindness and, qualities that are uplifting, let's just say. And I never thought of myself as materialistic. I didn't grow up with a lot of material belongings. It just wasn't my orientation. But I realized that maybe I was a little bit more materialistic and a little bit more oriented to prestige than I had originally anticipated when I thought my husband and I were going to be doctors and live the rest of our lives from that vantage point. And now I might be married to basically kind of putting it together dancer when there wasn't even a career. I don't even know what to say about it. And I had to get really clear that actually I love him and who he is rather than loving being married to a doctor, which I don't need to say more about it, but I'm sure you know what I mean. Now, I'm not aware of either of you having any adventures equivalent to leaving medicine and going into folk dancing, but each of you have really dramatically expanded your professional identity, which means I'm sure that you've expanded your personal identity in order to keep pace with the expansion in the professional identity. I mean, training doctors on real estate, doing these TikTok videos seen by I don't know how many thousands of people. Will you talk about how that has been? Has it like what have you needed to face that you wouldn't have needed to face if you just continued to raise your family, be devoted to one another, and practice anesthesiology and ophthalmology respectively?
Yeah, I can start with this. I had no intention when, kind of starting these different ventures. I think that just like most people in medicine, the dream is to be a doctor, live a
Yes,
good life,
yes.
live a comfortable life, I think is what we all kind of dream of, see patients and kind of live like that. And that was always my intention with medicine. And, getting into med school was just a step there. The thing was that once I became an attending and I got what I considered was my dream job, that's the place I wanted to work. I got it. And then a couple of years into it, things changed. I mean, things tend to change. Kind of found out exactly my job wasn't what I thought it was. Medicine may not have been what I thought it was. And so then I started venturing into these other things. Now, I always kind of had this thing in the back of my mind that I always thought like, what if I went into something else? I loved medicine, but I always had this like inside desire, like, oh man, maybe I could have done well in business or I could have done well in this or that. But then I always kind of just squashed that because, medicine was the path. Right. And so at that point, when things opened up, medicine wasn't what I thought it was. I was like, all right, maybe I'll try something different, just to see, just to add things to the plate and just see. And so, yeah, I mean, I started investing in real estate, started learning from other people who were doing what I wanted to do and be like. And, there were other doctors out there just living a good life. And they were still practicing medicine because they loved it, but they were able to have options and choices. And so that's how I got into all this real estate investing stuff. But again, it wasn't like necessarily like a super intentional thing from the beginning. It was to be a doctor, that, Vicki was going to be a doctor and get married and just live a good life.
So what was it like the first time that you said to Vicki, you know what? I'm going to start spending more time learning about and investing in real estate and less time practicing medicine. How did Do you remember anything about those communications?
I think the only thing I really remember is her saying, just don't lose our money.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
just don't lose our money. I think it was more like about security for her. Like she's always been very supportive of me doing all sorts of things, right? Of following different, passions, and just like she knows I get excited by a lot of different things. I mean, not like paid jobs, but just like interests, right? I'm like into
Yes.
this for a while, or into that, right? Into golf or into whatever, or just like these fun little ventures and things like that. So she's always been super supportive of all that. And so when I said we're going to start investing in real estate again, her primary thing was about the security and making sure it's good. But the other thing she did say was like, run it by my dad. Because her father actually was a great example for both of us, as he's a anesthesiologist as well, doctor, but he was actually very, very successful in real estate investing as well, and was able to balance that. And that's not even something that I really knew about. But once I figured that out, I mean, again, I started talking to him like crazy. And so that actually helped, because it's something that actually in a way kind of bonded, her father and myself, and talking about that. And in some ways I became, more like him in that way. So.
Do you remember that conversation, Vicki?
I don't remember that conversation specifically, but, just like to backtrack a little bit, Peter has always been kind of entrepreneurial. I always tell this story, like we would be in medical school, we would be studying at the library, and he would all of a sudden like, I have a great idea for an invention. Or like, we should start a med spa. We should open up a restaurant. Like like this is during medical school. And I remember being like, okay, babe, let's finish medical school, one of those things. And just like Peter said, he would come up with these ideas every once in a while. And I learned very early on to be like, okay, honey, that sounds great. Let's awesome. I didn't want to like squash it. And so we would, so you
it's a fine art to be supportive. It's a fine art to be supportive and realistic when talking to a dreamer.
Exactly. And so I kind of got used to it, so I think like when the real estate thing happened, I don't remember that conversation specifically because it literally was one in probably hundreds that I had heard, but he's right. That sounds very familiar. Like, okay, that's great, honey. Like, that's awesome. Just don't, I guess don't lose too much money. Don't quit your day job yet. Was probably one of the other things I said. And definitely, talk to my dad, because my parents had a lot of experience in that realm. And so I just would feel more comfortable if my parents were on board, if there was like any big investment or any big steps he was going to take. So,
yeah. Okay. That makes so much sense. And what about when you started doing TikTok videos and they started going viral, and there you are showing this fun, smart personality to the world? Was that also just like, well, you're an independent woman, you do what you want?
I mean, I don't think that just like happened, right? So that was kind of the evolution also, so, so we started practicing medicine at the same time. So when he was going through his issues, becoming an attending and, things not panning out, I had kind of a similar realization, when you start practicing as a woman and then you get pregnant and you have a child, things change, and you realize that maybe a traditional job isn't as supportive as you thought it was going to be, or it wasn't going to be as easy. And it's never easy, but you realize how difficult really it is to struggle and juggle being.
Yeah. And it's not really a moral issue about having it all. It's like, what are you actually going to prioritize at any given time?
Exactly. Like logistically,
Yes.
And so I was coming against that wall, and, he, again, very supportive, maybe you should look at other things. And I started getting involved with like direct marketing and doing like side businesses, getting comfortable with that idea. And that was in 2006, I want to say, like when social media was getting big, that was Facebook, right? That was the very beginning of Instagram and then Facebook. And so I started getting very comfortable with social media marketing and putting myself out there. And that just evolved, right? And then Instagram took off, and then TikTok. And then I started building my own brand and doing more education. And then what you see with TikTok is years in the making, like.
Okay, that's so beautiful to hear, because it really looks natural and like you just pop that out. And of course, what you're saying makes so much sense. So, but I do want to ask you, because I think this is really a challenge for doctors in particular, to shift from being, I'll just call in service, where patients are assigned to us, to becoming a salesperson, to being using your voice to promote something and get people to take action other than for their health. Are there ways in which shifting that focus and growing those skills changed how you interact with other people as well, like Peter?
I mean, I'm sure it does. Yeah. I mean, I've never really thought about it that way, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of.
Well, I'll tell you very frankly, when I started, I don't really think of it so much as sales as much as enrollment, like showing people the benefit of what I do. And I started inspiring my children to take actions like cleaning up the living room in a different way, because I had developed these skills and they translated into my life right away. So that's a little bit also where the question comes from.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Well, I know you just made a video about
that. No, I mean, I think it is a mindset shift because, like you said, it's something with you, like when you feel like you know something, whether it's like real estate or, or like in my case, it was skincare. And then now it's more like education about like COVID and vaccines, masking, school mandates, all this, all these things, like the idea that I'm helping someone, right? I'm educating someone, I'm answering some questions that people out there have, and so I think that helps me get over a lot of that insecurity, like, oh, should I be doing this? Or, do people really care? And I think, realizing that people do, and people are looking for this information, and people, doctors need to learn about real estate, and when you think about it in that frame, that you're actually helping.
Yeah, then the place that you're coming from is actually not that different than patient care. Mm-hmm. Even if for non-doctors doing the same thing, it might look like it.
Yep.
That's really beautiful. Well, everyone listening, if you don't follow Vicki on social media, Vicki Chan MD, you definitely should, because I mean, any video I watch, it's educational and it makes me smile. And I think you have this really beautiful blend of both courageous and graceful as you share your message. So it's really awesome. And I want to ask you both a question that I ask all of the couples I interview, because I really think that relationship, long-term committed relationship, marriage is the ultimate vehicle for personal growth. And so I'd really love to know, Vicki, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Peter? And I'll ask you afterwards, Peter.
I think that one of the main things that I've learned is just how different we are, and that it's okay, like the whole idea of like introvert, extrovert, mm-hmm. That's us, right? Like, I guess I didn't realize how introverted I was until I saw him, how mm-hmm. extroverted he is. Mm-hmm. And there is not necessarily anything wrong with that, but it's just two different ways, right? And also just the ways we deal with like conflict too, that like I tend to withdraw and he likes to take it head on. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just how different we are. And seeing that, like, I've learned about myself more and, how I deal with it and how that's different. And I think the more you learn about yourself, that's
the whole point. Yes, yeah. Exactly. Actually, I want to ask a follow-up on that, because I'm currently in a phase where most of the couples that I'm coaching, they know their way when they have conflict and what each of them needs and how to handle whatever arises. But I'm in a phase of seeing how little people know about how to come back together when the thing has passed, unless they're just going to ignore it. That is always an option, or to continue the fight. But if one isn't going to do either of those, do you have a way, since you referred to that as an introvert when you come back and Peter's an extrovert, for how you kind of acknowledge what's happened, build on what's happened, and then move forward?
Well, I think that's one thing I've learned, so as an introvert, or just, and I don't know if I blame that, but it's also how my family works. Mm-hmm. So, mm-hmm. like we would fight and then like we would never really apologize, or like, we would move on, just like you said, like, and that's how my parents and I worked, but that's not how he works. And so I've had to learn that, actually. So we've had a lot of fights where like the day after I'm good, like, cause I can just resolve that in my head. but he can't. And so I've learned that we have to close the loop at some point.
Any tips for somebody who wants to improve that part of the cycle in their marriage?
Yeah, it's difficult for me. I mean, that part is something that we always work on because I feel like it's one of these things where, hey, you never go to sleep, angry at each other or unresolved. She can go to sleep and it's done. Like,
no, because then mine is, let's sleep on it.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you wake up, you're all set.
Yeah, I feel better in the morning.
But I don't sleep. I'll sit there and I'm like, I don't sleep all night because it's not resolved. Otherwise, your mind thinks. So that's something that we've always had difficulty with, is that unresolved now, and we have to talk about it, and we've talked about it, and we've talked about how we react and what works and what doesn't work. And it's still work in progress. But I think it also does help to like, if I can understand that, hey, it's like she wants to sleep on, that's important for her as part of her process. I'm sure that helps me mentally, but it's still very,
right. Because otherwise, as the person who's more like you in this dynamic, Peter, it feels like one's being rejected, which is not actually at all what's happening.
Right? Yeah, there's a story to it.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's fine with her. She just doesn't care, or this or that.
Yes.
Yeah. Or she doesn't care, or this or that. And then it just kind of kind of like festers and grows. And for me, I'm just like, let's just stamp it out. But also I found that that's part of our dynamic. And I mean, I think in trying to solve a lot of these things, actually, it's caused me and forced me to actually kind of, figure out how to, how to get past my own kind of like ways. It's difficult, but it's actually, we've gone to like marriage. We've dedicated time to this stuff, to try to learn how to do it. And sometimes like, it's very easy in that moment to be like, oh yeah, it makes sense. And then later on to try to actually really practice it. But I think it's something you got to keep hitting on again and again and again. But I do see some growth from her, and I think probably more growth from her than from me. So I'm trying to as well. But it's like, it's a natural reaction. You just want to get it resolved. Like, I don't know if it's just personality type thing. But
I think the important thing too that we learned in marriage, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because we always felt like, I'm sure he looked at me like, what's wrong with her that she can sleep on it? And I'm looking at him like, dude, just let it go. Like, just give it a minute, because things aren't, because things spiral, right? So like, okay, we need to take a minute. And he's like, no, let's finish it. So it's like, we're looking at each other like, oh, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with him? What's wrong with her? But what we've learned in these marriage seminars is like, that's how some people handle it. And there's not wrong or right. It's just understanding that. And once you understand it, then, so if I understand that he needs to close it, then I know that after I've taken my nap, that I do need to go and apologize or like address it, when I used to literally just forget about it, and vice versa. He allows me to step away. And so that helps, just understanding that about each other.
I really love how you articulated, each of you. And I think like the first phase, which you're long past, is just understanding how each person is and being compassionate and not judgmental, exactly what you just said. And that ultimately, when both people are devoted to personal growth and expanding their expression of their humanity and being more whole, that I think ideally we can each do both ways, and then it's a choice. So like, I think when a couple is ready for it, it's super fun to play with, okay, well, let's do it the Vicki way, and then take it as research. And then the next time do it the Peter way and take it as research, because if you're used to doing it your way, there are surprising benefits in doing it the other way, even if we still have our native preferences. But that just seems like the segue into, Peter, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Vicki?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always felt like, hey, I'm a super patient, just laid back, going guy. And I think I am for the most part, but you start to really understand what things really get you going. But it's humbling in a way, because it makes you realize that you have to keep growing, and you have to keep learning, and you have to keep dedicating time, all that stuff to get better. It doesn't allow you to just kind of sit there and, bask in this whole like, I'm I'm amazing, that type deal. Like there's always so much room to grow and stuff like that. So I think what it's taught me is that I have to continue to always work on myself. I have to always work on our marriage. I have to always do these things. Otherwise, otherwise, like if I was on my own, I probably don't get that mirror kind of like there to reflect all this stuff back to me. So that's been a great thing about our marriage.
Okay, I think that is so beautiful. And there's a way in which we expect children to learn and grow physical milestones, emotional milestones, intellectual milestones. And then somewhere along the way, we think, well, and now we're adults. But I just think it becomes more intangible, but the rate of growth ideally remains the same, because that's what makes for more connection, more fun, more joy. And I think the two of you really express that so beautifully. So it sounds like you have another summit coming up, Peter. So for anyone listening, is it only for doctors, your summit?
No, not necessarily. The summit that we're talking about is called the Financial Freedom Through Real Estate Conference, and it's virtual this year again because everything's going on.
Yeah.
But primarily, we get in there. We kind of talk about all things real estate. Anybody's interested in getting started, kind of some strategies to kind of make that happen. I think people need to hear stories and see different options, and that's what we try to do in this conference and summit. Bring examples of physicians and other high net worth individuals who have been successful in it. So, of course, we talk a lot and use the physician word and doctor word a lot there, but honestly, it's for anybody interested in getting started. And yeah, that's going to happen on September 10th through 12th. It's going to come up and, it's a free summit. So we want everyone to be able to participate on it. I don't want there to be any sort of barriers, any excuses for someone to say, hey, I want to just learn more. And so, yeah, they can find that. It's called Financial Freedom Through Real Estate, so they can find that on my website as well, Passive Income MD.
Yeah, and we'll have that in the show notes for sure, as well as both of your websites. And my husband, I just want to say, he took your passive real estate investing course, and you'd have to know him to realize that one of the absolute highest compliments that he gave when he said, the course is well organized. That was few words, much meaning, that had a whole implication that I'm familiar with. But with that, I knew that he has very high standards, and you must be a really good teacher for him to say it was well organized.
well, thanks for that feedback. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited. We've made our first investment, and I was reminded of that when you said, Vicki, don't lose our money. There's like all the possibility, but also the uncertainty. It's like a virginal real estate investment, and it's really exciting. And that's because he took your course. So yeah, that's wonderful. You're doing the summit. And Vicki, any particular project or platform, anything you'd like people to support you on?
Yeah, you mentioned, so I'm very active on social media, both on Instagram and on TikTok. And right now, obviously, we are in the middle of a pandemic. So a lot of my content is educational and just information about that. I'm very involved with an advocacy group called #ThisIsOurShot, basically a group of physicians that are working on that, fighting misinformation, getting the word out, getting good information out there for doctors and anyone who's interested. So definitely check that out. And that is something I'm very passionate about right now.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we'll put that in the show notes too. And I know you're both super busy with your beautiful family and all of your many professional projects. And I really appreciate you both coming on and sharing your story, sharing your wisdom. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having us. Bye.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Marriage Podcast. Please rate and review the show on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And if you have a question or a comment, reach out to me via my website at alexandrastockwell.com.